But so tapering off is really a fine art in a way.
Right,
You don't
it was.
want to do
That was
too much,
no.
and the sequence is actually important. So, like, that's true of like all these. My father used to have 15 different medicines, and I say, Dad, let's go over this whole list. Do you really need this one? Why don't you ask your doctor? Can he lower the dose on that one and so on? So I have to be.
And
really...
one of the medications, the new psychiatrist that I was working with, that was trying to help me, there was so little knowledge of it that the only thing we could find is that people went inpatient to come off of it because they had to get put on something else. So that one coming off of that was very scary, and it caused like the electrical shock.
Which one was that one?
It was called Invega.
Invega.
That's not real well known, but yeah.
Wow.
But a lot of these drugs that I was on, I know that there's veterans that have PTSD that the Veterans Administration is giving them, the VA hospital and stuff like that, because that's what when I would read for them, and they're anti-seizure medications that they also use as antipsychotics and stuff like that. And 3 of them, the medications, and when after doing research, we found were for schizophrenics, and I was not schizophrenic.
It was.
But they're going to make you that way if they can.
Yeah,
that's what
exactly
it seems
what
like,
happened.
because then they're guaranteed they're going to sell you some more of that
But with
stuff.
each medication I got off of, the more weight I lost, the better I felt.
Excellent.
And the only thing that was kind of an emotional roller coaster was that because I had been given those medications when my son passed away, some of them beforehand, some of them during, and then after, I was feeling again. And so I had to
go through that again.
Relive all that.
But that's ultimately healthy too.
Yes.
Rather than keeping it repressed, right?
Yeah.
So, but now you say
doesn't that tell you how much you were not experiencing?
Right. Yeah. Right.
That you just
Yeah, the flashbacks came back with they were there, smells, triggers. So that was kind of frustrating. And then of course, because of that, then there's the initial strains I'm using to treat my fibromyalgia and my herniated discs and stuff like that. And then I have to introduce something else that's going to kind of work with the PTSD and the triggers and stuff. So getting that balance, finding the homeostasis, food was a huge part of it, going to clean eating, trying to eat as natural as possible from the earth. That's been huge for us.
And you say you walk like over 4 miles a day?
Yeah,
and
probably
you
5
both look so
miles
healthy now. I saw
Really?
these pictures of you were both like
we went to the gym this morning.
Yeah, I learned how to.
Last night.
I was supposed to have back surgery, and I didn't want to have back surgery, so I finally hired a trainer for like 6 months, and I said I want to learn how to strengthen my core, and so he taught me how to lift weights. So I went from not
buff on top of it.
Yeah, I went from not being. I wasn't supposed to lift more than 10 pounds from a standing position to deadlifting 150 on a regular basis.
You are a Capricorn.
Wow. Yeah. Well, listen, you were just saying about what strains and so on. Do you want to go into a little more detail about that? Because I think that's kind of really detailed information that could help people with. So what strains do you mean that you're talking about here?
Well, that's when people ask me, what do you use? And it's really, I try to explain to them how, because our receptors are all different, how different strains work for different people and stuff like that. But I know, like, for my fibromyalgia, if I'm having a fibromyalgia flare, I'm going to look for strains that are high in pinene and limonene, because those are the ones that seem to work on those kind of pain receptors and stuff like that. My go-to when I'm just kind of in a general, like, anxious, and a lot of times my pain will cause me to be anxious. I'll go to like Jamaican Lion. It's a CBD strain, but it's like we found that for me, the CBD strains that are indicas don't work well. I do very well with the sativa dominant or hybrid CBD strains.
But you also were very particular about the terpenes.
Yes.
And what about the Jamaica Lion? What terpenes are in that one?
What did we figure out why that works for me? There's not a lot known that I haven't been able to find with Jamaican Lion.
I'm drawing a blank. I know.
He's too high.
No, but see, this is important that we're learning this stuff.
Yeah.
And Nikki and I, we want to do a course with strictly terpenes, right? Or and not just with the synthetic ones, but which plant has those ones, right?
Yeah.
And so it's a wonderful little adventure, I think. Right, that's the way to know it. But I think one of the things about when you first started to talk about it, you didn't immediately say sativa indica. No, you started talking about the terpenes to begin with.
Yeah.
And I am really thinking more and more that the terpenes give you more information about what this particular strain is going to do, because the terpenes vary, right? And sativa can have, you said, a sativa CBD strain,
typically,
as opposed to an indica CBD strain, and they work differently. And part of that difference, obviously, is going to be the terpenes in the different ones.
Right. We found, so like with the tangies and stuff like that, those the citrus, the limonene, those ones. I have for ADHD, for focus and stuff like that. They keep me very alert and in the moment and what I'm supposed to be doing and stuff like that.
Yeah. Jack Hair.
The Jack. Yeah. Oh yeah, the Jacks. Any of the Jack strains are.
You're becoming a pro.
Right. But see, now that's the thing with you're talking about the citrusy ones, the limonene, and so. But what happens? The same thing happens. Say if I were to crack open a lemon right now, right? Just like we would all be breathing that in, and all of it, we'd all feel a little bit
alert.
brighter up like that, just because of that, and it would pervade our atmosphere and so on.
Just thinking about it.
And so that's why I think the terpenes work in this way. I talk about this where they send the precognition.
Yeah.
You're smelling it, and that's already telling you what's going to happen when you ingest it.
Right. Anymore, even when we do buy from dispensaries, I don't necessarily look. Most people look at THC percentages and stuff like that. I don't really want to know. I like some of them. If you're lucky, you find ones that are tested and their terps are listed and stuff like that. But for us, it's more of, well, let's look at it, let's smell it, and so if it doesn't smell good, then we don't, and a lot of them you're finding. One of the reasons why he started growing was because when we were finding that a lot of the dispensaries had kind of a chemical smell, like a after smell, like there's a residual.
Flush it.
Well, yeah.
And I started getting headaches.
There are a lot of reasons. Now, see, I keep saying that there are many people who have maybe not such a wonderful experience with cannabis.
Yeah.
And it could be that's pesticide on it.
Yeah.
It could be, like you said, it wasn't flushed. There's too much nitrogen or phosphorus in it.
You can look for this clean green certified.
Yeah.
Make sure that whatever you get, if you're going to a place like Harborside.
Yeah.
And also just the whole idea that the purity of this medicine is paramount, right? It's really very important.
And we can't grow outdoors, but he's doing it indoors, but he's doing it all the biodynamic farming using
I'm using
the living soil.
I'm using Malibu compost.
Okay.
I use the soil and then the compost for teas. And
I was at this conference, and they make these, these light shafts. You know how you can get for your kitchen, right? Right? Well, they make them for your grow room.
Yeah.
So you can bring real light in, and they have a thing where you can change it with someone. You might want to look into that, because you could get one or two just for that space. And have it, and then it cuts way down on whatever your electric bill is. So you got kind of a greenhouse.
Oh yeah.
Let me ask you, what do your children think of this?
So when I first got my card, my daughter was at camp, and when she came home, I laid out all the literature that we had been given, that we had researched, and said this is what I've done. My oldest one is now 24, and my youngest is 18. Okay. So my youngest, on her 18th birthday, went and got her card. So she's very active.
But aren't you very active now in promoting cannabis?
Yes, I'm trying to promote it in a positive way to try to break the lazy stoner stigma. That's why the 420 games were so paramount to participate in, and I just I want to show people. I have loose skin, but I have muscles, and I want to this is what cannabis does for me.
That's right.
And it's so I want to show that stigma that people are unhealthy and this and that. Not me.
There's a vitality, a vibrancy that you both have. That, but and
I find it ironic. I was just thinking how. When they probably still do call cannabis a gateway drug. These gateway drugs. And if anything, it was the gateway to get you off of the other drugs. It was the gateway out the other side.
But see, now your realizations are not just about opiates or about cannabis. Your realizations are about diet.
Right.
Right? Your realization is about exercise.
Yeah.
Right. And I can say that for the first time, with someone who's struggled my whole life, for the first time in my life, and I'm 42, I can say that I'm proud of myself, that I love myself. And that's something I couldn't ever say before, and even with all of failures, I guess you would say, or I like to think of them as life lessons that I've, endured and overcome and stuff like that. It's really, that was really hard for me. I just never looked at myself in a positive light, and now I do.
Wow.
Well, you can't have a better endorsement than
that. Okay. So, but listen, like they say, you do want to understand that cannabis is a strong and potent thing, and you want to use it responsibly and wisely. And it's a question not just of strain with different terpene and so on, but it's a question of what delivery system do you use. And is it best for you to have an edible? Is it best for you to have a tincture, a salve, right? Is it something topical? And all of these things. And so now more and more we're getting this information out, and people are finding, wow, I put this thing over. And not only does it not hurt, right? I take a little nibble of this and I sleep. You said 7 hours you hadn't slept before, right?
7 years. I hadn't slept in 7 years at that point, and I slept all night long.
And this post-traumatic stress disease is something that is really very pervasive, right?
Yeah, and
it's not just veterans who have
it.
it.
And that was my thing, is I didn't want to believe it. My father was a Vietnam veteran who committed suicide. And so when I was initially told that I had PTSD, I haven't gone through anything that would cause me, to have PTSD, not thinking about the fact that during my son's course of treatment, he had 7 stays in the ICU. So every time he was in the ICU, he was knocking on death's door. I mean, there was lots of different things that would cause PTSD that I didn't accept at that time. It was learning to accept it. And then once I learned to accept, okay, this is what I have, this is for reals, then I learned how to manage it.
Right.
And you just stood by there. So you guys have known each other since high school. This is an amazing story. Yeah. And now you're even growing the herb for her.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay, good.
Yeah, he actually didn't have a patient. He had his caregiver card the first year.
Right.
So he wasn't even participating. He just had his caregiver card.
Yeah.
I didn't start growing till 2 years ago.
Yeah.
But now with the new state law, you're actually guaranteed the right to continue to do that.
Yeah.
And this is something that, that's one of the reasons that the pharmaceutical company and or the tobacco companies don't really like that.
Right.
Because now you have the ability to grow the medicine in your yard. You know it's going to be pure. You know what's in it. And you know that this is something that actually makes our family more of a family.
Yeah.
First and foremost in that, right? And you're creating this yourself. So this is... that's the way it should be. We should be able to be in control of our own medicine.
Yeah.
Right.
And hindsight's 20/20. We look back at it now, and if we had known what we know now, our son's treatment would have been different. His graft versus host disease was primarily through his GI tract. That's something we could have treated with this.
With cannabis.
That's what caused him to go septic. It was his own. He was on such the amount of immune suppressors and stuff like that. His own gut flora was toxic to him.
Right.
We could have
had a lot to do with what the doctors were giving him for the
correct.
It's just an endless
and
cycle.
see, these are we were talking about. These are protocols that doctors have.
Right.
Right. And so it's not like they're required to do it, but that's the recommended way. And if you don't want to get in trouble and get sued, you're probably better off out of the protocol.
Right.
So
and
it means
because
that
his
millions
treatment
of people,
was so he was so monitored because it was almost all inpatient. You just it wasn't necessarily that I went with what the doctor said, because I knew of every treatment protocol there was for that except for cannabis, because I wasn't researching the natural treatment for it. I was researching what protocols were for his type of cancer, for his type of what he was going through. I wasn't looking at alternatives.
That's natural. That's what. And besides, once you get into the clutches of the Western medicine
right.
world, then you're afraid to change it because you're there. If you do anything to.
But it's curious that cannabis, in some ways, is our birthright.
Right.
It's been with human beings for a minimum of 10,000 years. They're archaeological things.
I grew up in a very cannabis-friendly household. My uncle grew it in my grandma's backyard. I mean, it wasn't, so it wasn't, I wasn't anyone that like poo-pooed it or anything like that. It just, it wasn't the choice. It wasn't, in high school, it wasn't my party drug. It wasn't,
Right. But there was also a kind of feeling, I suppose, that, good girls didn't do pot. They got a little drunk, right? That was, and that was okay. Society said that was okay. Yeah. And so that there was still that stigma and we all still bought into it. Yeah. So much so, right? And now it's like, to be able to take, we should have the freedom of self-treatment in a way that we can know that this is right for us, right?
Right.
And so that, anyway, I could go on about
my primary care physician first said when I told him that I was tapering off the drugs and what I was using, he was against it. He said his exact words was, he goes, for people who have HIV or cancer, but I don't think that it's good for the general population. A year later, when I went in for my physical, and by this point I'm lifting weights, I've dropped weight, I'm off all the medications, he now touts me as the walking poster child for medical cannabis. Wow. He said I'm the only one of his patients that have the kind of conditions that I have, and I take nothing, because I don't take over the counter. No Advil, no Tylenol, nothing like that.
So you take nothing any longer.
So you primarily smoke the vaporizer?
Supplements.
Is that what you do?
Yeah, I have a volcano at home.
Turmeric.
We every once in a while we'll smoke a joint or something like that. I have edibles, tinctures. I use a concentrated oil 3 times a day, and stuff like that.
A concentrated oil, and that's
an RSO.
RSO, okay,
it's a whole flower.
Right. Yeah, that's what so-called Rick Simpson oil. It's not Rick Simpson making it anymore, and so on. And now I believe that they have CBD-rich Simpson oil and so on.
Yeah,
that's what it is.
That's what we have to find for her.
And he makes the capsules himself. He puts the little amounts in, and he mixes it with MCT oil into the capsules.
Okay.
And
then they're ready to go.
What's MCT oil?
It's like a broken down coconut oil.
It's like the really good stuff in the coconut, and they kind of extract it out.
Okay.
And so that carries it into the body. Or
helps absorb.
It's a fat, so it helps breaks it down.
Well, the thing is that research isn't. Right. If you take the time, it's all on the internet.
Right.
Exactly. That's exactly what I tell people. I say, if you want to know, you will find it.
Yes. Yeah.
You will find it, because there's no. When people say, "Oh, I can't know," don't tell me you can't.
Exactly.
I have books that I can get the information online. Right. It's out there.
There's a lot of good stuff.
But it's the bravery. It's the bravery of you to, because you didn't want to do that at first.
No.
And you had to persist. I mean, that's amazing.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And then you had to finally be brave enough to say, okay, screw it, let's try it. Nothing else is working.
Well, she was getting back injections, and they weren't working anymore.
Every 4 to 6 months, I was going in for bilateral spinal epidurals because of the herniated
four herniated discs in her lumbar.
Well, I hate to say this, but just think how much money they were making off of that.
Right.
Oh, yeah.
From all the insurance companies paying for it. And some people say, well, they have all this fancy equipment. They got to use it somehow, so who can they... And then they charge it to that insurance company and so on.
But you had the bravery to do this. But wait, so explain this, though. So you do that one night, you do the first thing, you do the what was it, diesel, New York diesel or something?
The sour
diesel.
Sour
yeah.
And... what did that overnight change you, or did it take a few more days?
No, because I actually had a bad come down the next day. So I felt
you were still on 7 drugs at that point, right?
Yeah.
Right. Actually, I was on I think 8 at that point, because I had been able to tape off 1 completely at that point. So so with it helped me sleep for the first time, but it also gave me a bad reaction with the next day. So
interesting.
Yeah, so it was very much...
And then the next time you smoke, see, that's another thing about having enough courage to try it another time.
Again.
That's the thing,
Yes.
Right. And actually, the week I got my card, the very next day I had an MRI scheduled, which I was fearful of, and I had them often because of my back. And I woke up with a migraine, and I was going to cancel it. I said, I can't do this. I can't. He goes, let's try the tincture. And I'm like, no. What if it makes me messed up? He goes, let's try the tincture. I was this close to calling and canceling the appointment, and I tried the tincture, and 30 minutes later, I was dressed and out the door of the appointment. And
really?
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah.
So you could.
So now, what tincture was that? Was that a CBD tincture?
It was a Cannatonic.
It was ACDC.
ACDC. Yeah.
Okay.
See, these are strains
CBD.
that are coming in now that have the CBD.
It was an ACDC tincture, yeah.
Okay, well, good. That's interesting.
And it was just like half of a dropper under the tongue, and I switched it around my mouth, and I laid there. And
So why under the tongue? Explain about that.
because your mucosa in is more susceptible, it's more porous, it absorbs it faster, gets it into your bloodstream quicker.
And it doesn't go through the liver either. That
Well,
part.
at some of it does, because you still do
You
swallow
swallow
some
a
of
little
it.
bit.
Right, but it just right away it's
Yeah.
going
Into the
yeah.
bloodstream.
Right.
Yeah.
Well, that's interesting too.
It's a good story.
Thank you.
Well, at any rate, is there anything else you want to share with people about cannabis or your experiences or something about?
Just that it's saved my life. It saved our marriage, because our marriage was on the rocks.
Yeah.
It's opened up the world in a way that I never expected it.
And you're actually growing something in the garden, which is a whole nother level of experience. Were you growing things before?
I tried it one time.
When we were like 19
Yeah,
or something like
in
that.
I used to kill houseplants too in the old days. Yeah, no, but no, there's something special about actually growing this thing, and your hands get dirty.
Yeah.
And it's a different kind of feeling. In
The
your
passion.
fingers.
His passion. My friends, when they try his stuff, they're just like, you could see they're like, you can taste the love that he's put into these
the
plants.
intention.
Yeah.
And the love is actually the
Grown
focus
with
and the
such
concentration that you do it, and then you have this feeling
Because
that
they
this
all
is creating
smell.
good.
They smell so different. They're so much more fragrant, and you do get some of the terpenes, but then some of them smell like a bouquet of flowers, and you're just like, this is crazy.
Yeah.
What did you do to create
Well,
this?
because they have like 5 or 6 terpenes,
Right.
not just the
Yes.
dominant one.
Right.
And like
and
the
they're
same strain has the
beautiful.
different phenols, and like you get a different effect from this one and this
Exactly.
one. It's like
And so we know about the living soil. Are you interested in that, the living soil techniques?
Yeah.
So you're using some of that. Did you say biodynamic?
Yeah, I haven't gotten into the whole
Well, it's a step-by-step.
earthworms.
Not yet.
I want to get to that point where there's earthworms in this.
I just built a worm bin.
smart
I just
pots.
built a worm bin.
Yeah.
It's like 8 feet long and 2 feet wide.
But he
It's
makes his own. He makes his own lactobacillus.
I tried that one time, and
inject
I'm-
it. He wasn't sure.
I know there's benefit, but I wasn't.
Well, you got to be careful also, because sometimes if the experiment goes wrong, it's
Yeah.
not going to be. And there's another thing you can do with bokashi and things like that.
But
Anyway, it's just fascinating. I'm really
bokashi.
getting into living soil,
Right.
learning every day
Right.
about it. It's just fascinating.
Yeah, I want to get into the bokashi. I haven't gotten into. I know
All right.
it's.
Hey, that's a whole other conversation. All right. So anyway, thanks so much for joining us, and thank you, Desiree and
Thank
Brent.
you.
This has been and for sharing
you.
your story and what you've learned about it. And
Yeah.
thank you for joining us.
No, this is, you just, remind me why we work so hard every day to try to get the word out that cannabis is truly medicine.
Yeah.
And it works.
Thank you.
Amen.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Thank you.
Enjoy.